Welcome back to another DPS analytic video. This is going to be the second week of Naxxramas for Season of Discovery. Just like last week, we'll be looking at the heroic difficulty. Once we have enough information, we will be moving over into the mythic difficulty, but as it currently stands, there's just not enough information to use it as an accurate metric. Looking at all percentiles first, we have pretty much the same thing as last week. The destruction lock well ahead of everything else, but we do have a couple new classes at the top with the survival hunter, feral druid, and fire mage all moving up quite a few positions as last week, but other than that, pretty much the same thing as the following week. Looking at the max percentile, we now have the melee hunter, feral druid, and then the fire mage in those top 3 positions. Last week we had the destruction lock, feral druid, and then the fire mage in those top 3 spots. Destruction lock moved down quite a few positions, and now the affliction lock has taken over. And then the assassination rogue, pretty much the same position as last week. Moving on to the 95th percentile, the destruction lock still ahead of everything else, but the gap has been closed quite a couple of positions compared to last week. Fire mage, melee hunter, feral druid, affliction lock, and survival hunter all moving up very close, and the rep pally not too far behind that as well. And then finally going through each boss fight specifically and picking out the top performers. So we're going to go to max percentile and go to patchwork first. Fire mage well ahead of everything else by around 2,000 to 3,000 DPS. Next up we have Grobulus, your melee hunter, fire mage, and feral druid sitting pretty comfortably ahead in those top 3 spots. Next we have Gluth, melee hunter well ahead of the feral druid by around 1,000 to 2,000 DPS. Moving on to Thaddeus, we have the fire mage well ahead of everything else once again because of that damage modifier by around 7,000 DPS. Next up we have Noth the Plague Bringer, Frost Mage pretty far ahead, which I was not expecting. And then the Ellie Shaman right behind that by around 1,000 DPS. Next we have Hygen, melee hunter well ahead this time around, with the rep pally and assassination rogue taking those next 2 spots. For Lotheb, we have the melee hunter taking the top spot this week, whereas last week we had a caster DPS, shadow priest, and fire mage both very competitive on this fight as well. I would expect to see them move up further, but the melee hunter is completely proving that wrong. For the next fight we have a Nubricon, melee hunter once again, neck and neck this time though with the fire mage, pretty much almost tied for that first place spot. And then we have the balanced druid followed by the frost mage. For Faralina, we have the fire mage once again in that top place spot by around 2,000 DPS. Following that is the affliction lock, rep pally, and then the feral druid. For Mayexna, we have the fire mage again super far ahead of everything else. Following that is the feral druid by around 1,000 DPS. For Instructor Resuvius, we have the feral druid, assassination rogue, and then the melee hunter. Moving on to 4 horsemen, we have the feral druid once again very high for almost every single fight, pretty much tied with the affliction lock this week. Following that is the destruction warlock and the assassination rogue. Moving on to Saffron, we have the affliction lock, fire mage, and then the melee hunter taking that first place spot by around 2,000 DPS. Feral druid again not too far behind, and same thing for the destruction warlock. And then moving on to Kel'Thuzad, we have the balanced druid taking the first place spot this week by a couple hundred DPS. Following that is the Ellie Shaman, Affliction Lock, Fire Mage, and then the Feral Druid. And that's pretty much it for this week. Be sure to like and subscribe for more videos just like this one. Comment down below what you'd like to see next. And as always, I will see you in the next one.